Hi, my name is Taylor Thomas Smythe, and I'm the author of the award-winning Kingdom of Florida fantasy series. Today, I'm going to share with you the top 10 references and influences for the Kingdom of Florida book series. Ready? Here we go. The first reference is the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. If you're into fantasy, you've probably read the Chronicles of Narnia. It's such a great, simple story, and it follows a group of children who find a magical parallel world and discover that they are secret kind of royalty in this magical land. There's also this incredibly iconic scene in the first book that came out, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where you see this lamppost in the woods. There's no explanation of how or why it was there, but C.S. Lewis did such a good job of creating this iconic imagery. That imagery really kind of captures the imagination, and I wanted to pay homage to that in this series because I was so influenced by the Chronicles of Narnia as a whole for this concept of my series, The Kingdom of Florida. In the first book in my series, which is called The Golden Alligator, the children are told to look for the lamp when they're trying to find help. And in the series, the lamp symbolizes kind of the good guys. And so that imagery and that idea of the lamp came straight from the Chronicles of Narnia. This is also referenced in the second book, which is called The Lamplight Society. That phrase, lamplight, also is nodding to the Chronicles of Narnia's lamp and lamppost. It's also a nod to one of my favorite scriptures, which is, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." The second reference is Romancing the Stone, which is a little bit lesser known 80s adventure movie. It's such a fun movie. It's my kind of go-to feel-good movie. It's got this great adventure story to it, this kind of treasure hunt with a treasure map that has like kind of a secret thing to it. That was all very influential to the Kingdom of Florida story. There's a scene in Romancing the Stone that I kind of echo in book 7 of the series. In this scene, the characters have just kind of found the place where the treasure is supposed to be hidden, and they reach into this pool in this dark cave and are kind of feeling around, and they find this kind of heavy ceramic thing covered in like grass and algae. And as they kind of start to turn it over, Kathleen Turner's character, Joan Wilder, says, "It's a priceless statue." And it's kind of, the music is building and you're kind of expecting it to be that. But then they turn it over and hold it up into the light, and it's this like Easter bunny statue that is definitely not priceless. It's like some sort of cheapo Easter decoration. So the scene really just subverts your expectations. You're expecting it to be this really big deal, but then it's kind of this comedic moment. I loved how they did that. So I kind of did a nod to this scene in book 7 of my series, where I won't spoil too much since this is just coming out recently, but the characters are on this treasure hunt for these different ancient items, and they pull this thing out of the water and think it's like this ancient statue as well, and they're disappointed the treasure isn't there, and so they end up cracking it into, and the treasure's inside. The next reference is to The Rescuers, which is one of Disney's early animated films. This movie, I just remember loving it. Again, it's just a fun adventure with like a great sense of mood and tone. The story takes place mostly in this kind of swampy bayou setting, so it's very mysterious. There's like these scary alligators that the evil lady Madame Medusa has as pets that are just like freaky and scary. They're enormous. There's a scene where they take the main character and just kind of grab her by her clothes and are carrying her, and she's like so tiny compared to them. Very scary. The other scene that's really scary, and that is the ending, where Penny, the orphan girl, is sent down into this cave to find this priceless diamond, and she's looking around for it, and the bad guys are up at the top of the cave, so she can't escape back up or they'll get her. That's the only way out. There's also like a tide rising in, so the water is coming in through this kind of hole in the ground. She finally finds the diamond. It glints in the light, and it's inside this like skeleton head, a skull. She can't get it out, so she finds this ancient sword and she uses it to pry open the jaw. And I remember that scene just capturing my attention. I remember feeling so scared and tense watching that scene as a kid, and it really stuck with me. But I loved that the movie could make me feel that way. And so I really tried to echo this moment and feeling and a lot of the elements of that same scene near the ending of book 6, which again I won't spoil because it's only been out for a little while, but it really works well in the Kingdom of Florida series. I made another reference in that same book to the same movie. The first chapter of book 6 is called The Rescuers, which is a direct reference, and so I wanted to just make sure I paid my respect and make sure that it was clear right off the bat that this is referencing that. The next reference is to Osma of Oz. Everyone has heard of The Wizard of Oz, but you might not know that The Wizard of Oz is the first in a 14-book fantasy series, which are incredible. I remember discovering them when I was a kid and feeling like I had found this kind of like secret treasure trove of stories that no one else knew about. Osma of Oz is one of the early books in the series. It takes place mostly in the domain of the Gnome King, who is like a recurring villain in the Oz series. He has kidnapped the royal family of this neighboring country next to Oz and is holding all of the members of the royal family hostage. So our heroes, which include Dorothy and Osma of Oz, they go to the Gnome King's palace and they're going to try to rescue the royals. And he makes them this deal to play this game with him that if they can guess which of the artifacts in his expansive kingdom are the artifacts into which the royal family has been turned into, he'll let them go free. But if they guess wrong, they get turned into artifacts and ornaments themselves. So this game I thought was really fascinating. When I read it as a child, I remember the tension dragged on as I would like read a chapter, go to bed and read it the next night. Like it just felt like it was really drawn out, like the characters were experiencing it. And I also loved that it was so contained. Like it wasn't this huge like action sequence, but I still felt like it was so riveting and engaging. And so I pay like very direct homage to this concept in book 5 of the series, which is The Curse of Coronado, the book 5 in the Kingdom of Florida series. I put my own spin on what the kind of twist is. There also were just general reference to this series. I was really inspired by the illustration style in these books. It's kind of realistic, feels very like from the time that it was made. So I wanted my Kingdom of Florida series to have that same kind of ink, hand-drawn illustration feel. And so when we did the first book, I showed books in the Oz series to Allie, my illustrator, to inspire her. And so she did a great job of kind of capturing that same essence, but also putting her own flair as an artist into it. The next reference is to the Trojan Horse, which is a common story that we've heard in kind of Greek mythology. The idea that these people built this horse and hid their men inside of it, gave it as a gift to their enemy so that they could get inside the walls, and at night when everyone was sleeping, they climb out of the horse and kill everyone and take over. When I was writing book 1, the first book in the series, which is called The Golden Alligator, I needed a way for the characters to get into the palace undetected. I was already, a third into writing the book, and I didn't really know how they were going to get there. I just knew that they got there somehow. That was in my outline. And I also didn't have a title for book 1 that I liked. I had a working title that was like just very generic. So thankfully this idea of using the concept of the Trojan Horse and putting a kind of Florida spin on it came to me, and that actually sparks what the title of the book is, The Golden Alligator. The characters in the first book have to find this artist to help them build this way into the kingdom. So the artist already has this kind of alligator sculpture ready, but they decide to cover it in gold leaf. So it's just like very nice, beautiful thing, and it's like just big enough for all 3 of these kids to fit inside of it. They eat this fruit that makes them sleep so that they can't be detected, and they get the curator of the evil prince to buy the golden alligator, and so they ship it into palace's walls. And so that's how the kids kind of sneak their way into the palace in the first book. And I won't tell you what happens after that because you have to read the book, and I don't want to spoil it because it's just a really fun ride. If you're writing a fantasy story about and based in Florida, it's pretty much a non-negotiable that the Fountain of Youth has to show up. So the Fountain of Youth is another big reference. The Fountain of Youth is the name of the 4th book in the Kingdom of Florida series. And so obviously that ancient legend plays a huge role in the story of that book. When I started writing this book and outlining the series, I knew that I wanted to incorporate the Fountain of Youth somehow. As I was kind of getting to this 4th book, I was kind of brainstorming, and I was trying to think of what's an unexpected twist I can put on it. So there are actually a couple twists to the Fountain of Youth legend that you're used to hearing, but these twists that I put on it myself, I don't want to spoil them now because again, I think they're really great to experience in context of reading the book. Putting this spin on the Fountain of Youth actually ended up giving me a whole story arc for another character that wraps up in a really satisfying way in the final book, in book 7, which is called Guardians of the Willow. I just released that book. If you haven't read it yet, it's out now. Go check it out. The next reference is the show Dark on Netflix. This is a very dark German science fiction show. It's so good. Highly recommend. It's 3 seasons. It focuses on time travel, but there's a lot of really interesting aspects to it. Just the tone. I was watching the show around the time that I wrote the first book in the series, but I was very influenced by one of the main characters, who's this kind of mysterious bearded man with a dark cloak that kind of travels into the town early on in the season, and we don't really know anything about him, but he kind of seems like a good guy, and he seems to know a lot more than most of the other characters. So I was really inspired by that character to create the character Marco, who is kind of starts out as this kind of like shadowy figure that's just like following the main characters, and they don't know if he's good or bad. He was not in the original outlines for the series at all, but he ended up becoming one of the most important characters for the whole series and one of my favorite characters to write. So that's the show Dark on Netflix that was a big inspiration. The Dark Crystal and Jim Henson puppetry in general were another big reference. The original concept and like seed of the idea that became Kingdom of Florida was this idea that there is this magical world between the cracks of our own that's kind of like seeping in, and that our modern real world is kind of like grown around it, and the old world is kind of shrinking away. And I envisioned this old house, this kind of ramshackle Florida Spanish style house that's kind of like squeezed between 2 other buildings. Looks kind of vacant, but there's this maybe old kind of creature character that lives in it. All of my ideas for what this character looked like were these like Jim Henson, like Labyrinth, Dark Crystal kind of puppet style. And I ended up kind of scrapping that idea, or kind of morphed into some of the plot of book 1, and became the Azalea Drive house that they find in book 1. And then that kind of puppety character, this old creature character, became Lady Juniper, who's a normal human character, but she's kind of got that same like, just like very wrinkly, very like sweet, with a little bit of an attitude, and also kind of is very wise and knows a lot about magic and about the kingdom and its history. But I was very influenced by just those kind of like puppet fantasy world. There's a lot of creatures in the series that I envisioned them as kind of like, if it was ever done as a movie, like these are definitely like practical creature effects and puppets and like people in these big like costumes, and just love that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that sparked my imagination as a kid. And so I wanted to make sure that those kind of ideas were present in this book series. Lost. I don't think there's any way for me to make something that isn't influenced in some way by this show Lost. It's my favorite show of all time. Some of the things that really influenced me are first of all, the way that all the characters are very connected. The other thing related to that was something I really admired about Lost, is how they wove all of this like science fiction lore and like legends into the fabric of the story from the very first episode. In the pilot episode, we hear that like monster robot kind of sound crushing trees in the distance. So we knew there's like some sort of sci-fi element. But I love how the show just like gives you small doses of that. It allowed the show to kind of naturally become this like science fiction show. But when you get to those points, it feels like, okay, like we expected that, because this has always been present and we've kind of been building toward it. But they did it really masterfully, because it allows you to not feel overwhelmed by like exposition and this big like genre sci-fi kind of thing, but it just kind of like gives you these little morsels and clues that build up. And when you have all those pieces, like it makes sense when you get to that. So I really tried to emulate that in how I immerse the reader and the characters into the lore of the kingdom. In the first book, we kind of just get the surface level of knowing like what is the kingdom, what's the current kind of state of things, what's a little bit about what's happened in the kingdom in the past, with the triumvirate and the royal family and the evil prince. But we kind of just are on the surface of that in the first book. But each successive book, we kind of go further into it. We realize that there's like a lot more to the history of what the kingdom is. We learn connections to characters have to each other that, again, are like seeds that are planted already. Like those are referenced early on. So if you go back and read the series after you've finished it, you'll see like, oh, in book 2, we were already referencing this thing. Or in book 1, we're referencing this thing that happens in book 7, and so forth. And one more thing with Lost that influenced me was cliffhangers. Every episode in Lost always ended on a cliffhanger, and even like the going into commercial breaks ended on a cliffhanger. And so if you read Kingdom of Florida series, you'll see that I love to end chapters on cliffhangers. It makes it really like compelling, like you want to keep reading. So big cliffhanger guy, and Lost really solidified my love for those. All right, that brings us to the last reference. Drum roll, please. This last reference is the Harry Potter series. I loved the storyline and the mystery that is present in the Harry Potter series. I watched this great YouTube video about how the author uses mystery in that series. I'll put a link to that in the description. I loved how the mysteries in the Harry Potter series had really satisfying endings because they give you the clues to solve them yourself, but they also don't put them so much in your face that you feel like you spoiled them before you get to the ending. So I like to plant the ideas and the clues for the mysteries in the books, but have these kind of big reveal moments. I think book 5 was the biggest example of this. There's some kind of major revelations that come from seeds planted in earlier books, but also in that book, there's like a lot of clues, and I kind of use like red herrings and diversions to make you think that it's going to go one way, and then I kind of flip it on its head. So hopefully that was successful. I feel like it was, and other readers have just expressed how they loved those kind of twist endings and that satisfying twists because you have all the clues to solve the mystery yourself. All right, thank you guys for watching. This has been the top 10 references in Kingdom of Florida. You can find all of the books in my award-winning Kingdom of Florida series at kingdomoflorida.com or use the link in the description. Happy reading, hope you enjoy.